Good morning and welcome to the session of the Fireside Chat. It's a series of conversations we have with authors from across the world. Andrea is the author of the book Embracing What Remains. She holds a bachelor's from St. Michael's College in Vermont and Bachelor's of Art in journalism. She's a member of AlzAuthors, a community which is dedicated towards spreading and sharing the message around Alzheimer's and dementia. And uh, you stay in New Hampshire with your family, your husband, your kids, and a dog, I hear. Um, and this is your first book, a memoir. We are very eager and excited to know about it, to know about you and your journey. And it gives us great pleasure to have you here. So welcome.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Great. So Andrea, for us to get started, maybe you can tell us a little bit about your years growing up and maybe a little bit about your family and how and when books became a part of your life and words became a way for you to express.
Sure. So I was born and raised in Vermont, which is right next to New York. It's a little state. But when I was 11, my family moved to Chicago, and we lived there for, my parents lived out there for 24 years until my dad retired. But I would say that I started when I remember distinctly being in 4th grade and starting to write in a diary.
Mm-hmm.
And write, what happened to me or how I was feeling. And I really enjoyed doing that. It felt really good for me. And I actually continued that process all the way through high school and even a little bit in college. I started reading at probably in kindergarten. And I remember really liking Laura Ingalls Wilder, which was sort of like a memoir of her life. I don't know if you've heard of her, but she's an author, from the United States that grew up in the 1800s in the Midwest.
Sure.
And I connected with her. She was one of 3 girls. And anyway, so I feel like that sort of sparked me a little bit. And then in high school, I did a lot of writing. I was actually on the yearbook staff.
Okay.
And we wrote a book. And that was sort of how I got into journalism. And then I went to college and got my degree in that. And so I've always been a writer form, Did I think I was going to write a book? No, but here I am. So, yeah.
So who were your earliest fans and earliest readers who wanted you to write more?
Definitely my mom and dad, if that's what you mean. My mom has supported my writing from a very young age. They even have a framed poem that I wrote from like 8th grade in the house because she's like, it was so good writing. And actually both my parents really encouraged me to write a book. They didn't know what I would write about, but they said, you should write a book someday. And so I would definitely say my parents, and of course my husband and kids, fell in line eventually when,
Okay. So, and what are the kind of books, like the genres, the kind of stories that attracted you the most, the ones that drew you in and made you not put that book down, probably under the covers of your bed sheet or out in the park? What excited you the most?
I've always been a huge fan of realistic fiction or memoir. I love reading about things I can connect with. I'm not the type of reader that wants to escape from life. I'd rather feel less alone in it. So I books that I can connect with. When I was considering writing a memoir, I read a lot of other memoirs and, reading people's stories, being inspired by them to share their own story and mine. So, I also like books on sort of taboo topics, but are handled in an appropriate way.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've heard of the author Chris Bohjalian, but he wrote a very famous show right now called The Flight Attendant. He wrote the book that's based on.
Okay.
Anyways, he's written some other books too. And he talks, about different things like vegetarianism, midwifery, things that like people tend to kind of, you know, want to discuss.
Yeah.
So, um, yeah, so I'd say those kind of books keep me up at night because I want to know what happens. And I also like that possibly it's a true story, you know? So, mhm.
Is that how also I think you gravitated towards writing the story, which is obviously very real for you? Maybe you can tell us a little bit about the process and how you went about converging to the thought of putting this down in the form of a book.
Okay, so I think because I've been a person who writes in a diary or a journal my whole life, I'm very used to writing in first person, writing what I've experienced and how I feel. So
So,
it's something I was pretty well versed in. And so my memoir, as you can see or probably read about my father having Alzheimer's at a fairly young age after a very successful career as a surgeon.
yeah.
And when diagnosed, I started journaling again to sort of process how I was feeling. And after a couple years, I was looking at what I was writing and I was thinking, I think this could be a book because it's so fascinating how this is all unfolding and how I'm feeling and what my family's going through. So about 3 years into my dad's diagnosis, that's when I decided to turn it into a memoir.
Mhm.
And I did a lot of research, you know, like I said, I read other memoirs. I joined a support group for memoir writers. And I kind of learned about what a memoir really means to write and share. And so that's how that kind of happened. And then I just followed the process and I turned a lot of my notes and all my journal entries into the story.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know. I mean, obviously, this is very close to you, your family, and um, was it a part of you who that was concerned or nervous about sharing something which is so personal? And maybe I think I haven't read the book and I'd love to read it, but was it a part of you that found it difficult to expose, in some sense, a set of emotions that perhaps were very raw or unprocessed completely? What was that like?
Um, I think writing it was really cathartic. I think it felt really good to get the words out. And then there was the whole process of, do I want to share this with the world? How does my family feel about it? Especially my mother, because I felt like she was speaking on behalf of my dad at that point, and herself. And I think what ended up winning out for me was sharing my story was going to hopefully help other people and also let other people know what my family has gone through. And so it was worth it to me because I felt like there wasn't enough out there for me to read. So I thought I would write the story, you know, and share it with the world.
Sure. I was wondering if there is an underlying tenet that binds you all. And is it just storytellers or is there other people who are part of the community and how does that work?
So the majority of AlzAuthors are other authors who have written stories about dementia or Alzheimer's and how it's affected their life personally, whether they were a caregiver, a spouse, a sibling, you know, or some other connection to it. It's usually a fairly close connection though, and they share the story. We do have fiction books based on it. But yeah, the mission of our group is to create awareness and draw attention to the disease and also to educate people because so many people don't realize how it affects people mentally, emotionally, and physically. And I think it's also to support other caregivers to say, hey, we've been there, we understand, you can come talk with us.
Right.
So you know, the majority are authors, but we also have people who are just in the dementia and Alzheimer's community who want to support us, whether they do podcasts, our nursing homes or living communities. We have some doctors part of our group. So it's a really wide range of supporters, but everyone has some very close link to dementia or Alzheimer's.
Sure.
Yeah. For me, in my writing, I try to show a lot of contrast of who my father was before he was diagnosed and then how he was after. Sorry, my dog.
No problem.
Um, so you know, I do a lot of examples of from the past, like flashing back to the past to show the stark difference in my dad's personality or his emotional reaction to things. I can't speak on behalf of him as him, but I describe, in some detail how he's changed and how that's affected, me and my family.
Sure.
So you use examples, it's almost little stories, little clips from your life, and that should illustrate, the change if that's what you're asking.
No, I think partly yes. I do understand what you're saying. Essentially the before and after of the story helps you create that contrast and also narrate the story of the present better in context of the past. As a caretaker, sometimes I think you go through sometimes you go through guilt, sometimes you go through anger or frustration. You're not sure if life's been fair to you. At other points of time, you hold the hand of hope and you're very positive and optimistic. So I'm just trying to uh, understand the caregiver's mindset a little bit,
Okay.
And how that reflects in your book.
I think, to be honest, and I think most caregivers would agree that they go through the whole range of emotions, like you just said. There's the guilt, there's the sadness, there's the anger. It's grieving. You really are grieving your loved one before they pass away, because you lose them in a sense as they progress through the disease.
Sure.
I think it's important in memoirs and other books about dementia and Alzheimer's to be very honest about it and to show that range of emotion, because what you're doing is you're sharing with the reader, I was so frustrated that day, or I was so sad or angry, but then I have these moments of hope, and try to look for the joy or try to look for the happiness. So I think it's important to do, like you said, the balance, strike the balance of the hope with the sadness. And I think that's sort of what AlzAuthors is trying to do, is say, hope, you can find it, as depressing as it is, But I think the biggest thing is to be honest. And I think that's what, we're trying to do. That's what I was trying to do with my book, is to say, this is happening and this is real and you're not alone if you feel this.
Absolutely. So when you were ready with the first draft of your book, I mean, who was your first reader?
My mother. Definitely
Okay.
my mom. I would send her chapters and she'd read them. Because I wanted her approval, but I also wanted her input. And it's so funny because so many times she'd say, I don't even remember that happening, or I didn't know that happened. It was good for her in some ways, and also helpful to me if she would say, well, I think, so it was good. And then my husband, I would sometimes read things to out loud after I wrote them. I would say those two people that read it first, for sure, before my own editor. So.
And what was there something that your mother or your husband said with respect to their first impression that has stayed with you? Anything from that experience? Because it's a personal story, I'm just curious.
Yeah. I think my mom's reaction of being so supportive, so happy, but also at the same time being so emotionally affected. She said, oh, I read that and I cried. I felt like, wow, my words have power. Even though it's her story, it's our story. It was nice to know that those emotions came from her. And I think, when I would read it, especially out loud, I would have emotions I didn't even feel when I was writing it. Like I'd read it and I'd say, oh, wow. So I think that really stays with me, is her support, but also the way it affected her emotionally,
Would you be keen on writing another book from your personal experiences, or would you veer towards fiction, or is it a different genre that you would like to explore next?
It's a good question. I actually wrote a second book that follows up my first book, because my first book, not to spoil it, but my dad doesn't die in the first book. He's not he doesn't pass away at the end of that book. He's still alive. My dad did pass away though. So what I wanted to do was write like another book to follow that, to talk about the last year of his life and also the year after in my life, how I'm grieving, you know, like that process. That is pretty much done, but I'm not ready to release it. I think I'm still feeling a little attached to it and a little emotional about it, that I don't want to become vulnerable again to the world. So that on the back burner. But I am working on a fiction book, which is totally new for me. And a huge challenge because I don't typically write fiction. I usually write from my own life.
Sure.
And so I have had, it's been a year I've been working on it so far. So yeah, it's, I would say that it's a challenge for me to write not only in third person, you know, third person narrative, but to also create a story out of nothing, essentially.
Yeah.
You know?
As some of the authors I've spoken to, and when this topic comes up, I think there are 2 points I'd like to make here. The first is, even when I think that it's come out of nothing, it's always something about my life that it's caused it. So maybe you'll be surprised in that moment that you just mentioned about the current book. And the other one, I'm just very curious to know what. I mean, I don't know if it's too early to ask, but what's the general I don't know, outline or target audience, or the subgenre within this? Maybe you're ready to share it or not. I'm not sure.
It's just hard to explain. I would say it's realistic fiction. I wouldn't go as far as to say women's lit. I don't really know where it's going to fall in, to be honest. I was thinking last night, I'm like, how am I going to summarize this book? Okay. Briefly, it's a story of an older man and his son, and is actually dying from a terminal illness. And in comes this woman who is a writer, and she enters their life. And so the story unfolds of the connection between the three. And so some things will develop. I don't know if I want to share it yet because I don't know how to explain it. But
it sounds very reminiscent for me with Tuesdays with Maury. And that's one of my favorite books. So yeah.
You know, Tuesdays with Maury was a little bit of an inspiration for my own memoir, you know, to write about, and you're right, it's going to be along that lines. There's going to be a little bit of romance. There's going to be a little bit of mystery behind some of the connections between the characters that will unfold as the story goes on. And it's going to handle some heavy topics too, because he is dying. And so I think, you know, some of that does pull from my own life in some ways with losing my dad.
Sure.
So yeah.
When we talk about fiction that is realistic, how important do you think it is to paint the heavier emotions or the text with probably lighter brushstrokes? Or is it, do you think this is more style specific for each author?
You know, I think there's so many books out in the world that readers can choose what they want to read. And if they don't want to read something that's really heavy in the emotions, then they don't have to. But I think that some writers, you know, really excel at that. And some readers want that. They want that heaviness because they, you know, again, don't want to feel alone in the world. They feel connected. There's someone else gets it. Somebody else has felt that. Or they want to escape from whatever and feel that strong emotion, even if they've never felt it. You know? So I think, you know, we're in this world now of like trigger warnings and everything. And I think if I don't do them, I don't care if they exist in a book for me because I can handle it. But I just think it depends on the reader. And like you said, it depends on the writer. And if you want to carry a heavy theme, you should. And I don't think you should shy away from you know, writing about that stuff because someone out there is going to connect with it, appreciate it. And, you know, some people will say my book, they had to put down and read days later, or they had to take a break because it's so emotional. And I'm like, that's fine. You know, at least I'm evoking emotion.
Right.
You know, I also just don't think we should ever hold back what we're writing, because are you writing for you or are you writing for someone else? If you don't like it, then that's going to come across in your writing, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. You mentioned that you have 3 kids and a dog. So how does writing as a regimen fit into your day?
It's tough. Um, when I wrote my book, I had to do a lot on the weekends because I actually wrote it during COVID when my kids were home learning, you know, at home, not being in school, because I'm a stay-at-home mom. So I don't have a career outside of my house other than writing now. And so on the weekends, they'd have to leave, or I'd have to go hide upstairs and write. So a lot of what I do, even now with my kids being in school, there's always something, you know, that's interrupting me. And I'm the type of writer that needs a lot of quiet, a lot of time to focus and process. I can't have anybody around. So it's like these little pockets of time that I can fit it in. And I hope I'm feeling inspired when those times show up. So, I mean, yeah, it's either the dog's barking or the kids need something, or it's a, I don't know how I'm doing it. But, yeah.
No, it's inspiring to balance everything and to still make time for your second book nonetheless. And the third book, yeah, I mean, I think you figured it out for sure. And what has been your probably 1 or 2 takeaways from other authors in terms of what you've imbibed into your own writing?
You know, before I wrote my book, and even a little bit after, I didn't have connections with other authors in real life at all. You know, like I might the book I read, but never had I met another author and really connected with. And when I joined Instagram, I met so many other authors, and it's been such a wonderful experience because, first of all, most of them actually read my book, which I felt so happy about it. I felt so supported. And then, you know, we support each other in our writing and in our just every day of like, oh, I don't feel like writing today, or I don't feel like I can get through, you know, like another chapter or whatever. And so nice to talk to people and know that there are other people out there just like us. You know? And one of my friends who I met on Instagram, his name's EJ Yerzak, he wrote a book, and he had a bunch of authors involved in the writing of the book, and it was about our experiences with writing. And, you know, one of the things is when you're a writer, nobody knows you're a writer unless you tell someone. You know, if you're a doctor or something else, people usually can, okay, you're a doctor, we know this. But so you have to find your community, and this is where we found it, right? Or correct? So I think just knowing that everybody goes through the same, you know, lulls in their writing world or reading or just the challenges, it's nice to share with other people because it kind of propels you to keep going, you know? Like every time you read as a writer, I consider research, you know?
Yeah.
And so, especially now when I'm trying to write fiction, when I read, I'm like logging it in my brain, like, okay, that's a good idea, or I'll try that, or, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, even Luke, you know, with his last book that he wrote, I read a lot of it for him and kind of gave my opinion. And I learned so much about writing from that, even though I'd already written a book, you know? So
yeah.
It's such a great process to have a community of writers that you can work with, even if you do your own thing, you know, like you're going to write your own story, but it's nice to not feel alone in it, you know?
So what's the book that you're reading currently?
Oh, I am reading A Recipe for Rome, which is, it's fiction, but I do think it's based on the author's some real life experiences where it's about a woman who goes to Italy. It's a little bit of romance. She's pretending to be like married to this guy she goes to Italy with.
Okay.
And it's just so funny. It's like engaging. It's sweet. Your heart kind of breaks a little bit. And I so I love reading about it. So, but it's written by an author from Instagram who's an independently published author. And so it feels really good to support her. And it's really well written. So I'm
Very
doing,
nice.
you know, like, oh, okay.
Would you want to, if you are prepared and if you can, read out maybe a small passage or something from your book, or maybe a quote or something that's close to your heart?
Here you go. It says, the neurologist met with us and she asked my dad to clean his hands. She pushed the sanitizer towards him. Here, Richard, can you clean your hands? She asked while looking directly at him. I watched. I held my breath. I realized or assumed this was probably a test of his mental acuity, as well as an ability to perform a simple daily task. A test I'd seen him fail at home with me at the sink. How would he handle a pump bottle of sanitizer? He looked at her, at the bottle. She pushed it closer and coaxed him. Richard, the hospital is full of germs today. Can you wash your hands? He took it with his right hand and awkwardly pushed down on the top with the same hand. The other hand did not meet to catch the sanitizer flowing out. The doctor helped him and moved his hand under it. Dad just sat there with the sanitizer sitting in his palm as if it was some mystery liquid and he had to figure out what to do with it. I just want to keep reading though for a second because it's going to get interesting. Rub your hands together, clean them, the doctor directed him patiently with a sense of calm. Then the most interesting thing happened. I was amazed. I was in awe. My father began to clean his hands the way you see a surgeon on TV clean his hands in a scrub room. So my dad had Alzheimer's at that point and he was a surgeon, and so to see him do that was really interesting. Wow. Because cleaning was something he had forgotten how to do pretty early on.
Thank you for reading that, Andrea. That was beautiful. Thank you. Thanks a lot. I just want you to share any of your thoughts as a writer, a reader, or just as a storyteller with people, and if you have a message to share.
Sure. I think, you know, the biggest thing, no matter the genre you write or the story you want to share, so many of us write and then we get bogged down with, oh, that's stupid, I don't want to share it, or no one will read it, or blah, blah. I think the biggest thing to remember and to keep in your head is, why do you write and how does it make you feel? Because if you can answer those two questions and keep those in your head, you're going to keep going. Because when I feel like, oh, I don't think I can do this, or I don't want to do this, or no one cares, I say, why do I write? What is the story I want to share, and how does it make me feel after I write? Right? That's how I feel.
Yep.
And that's good to give any writer advice, whether you've written 20 books or no books. You know, like, there's something that you must like about it, that there's a feeling that comes out from you. And so that's what I think that, you know, people should stick with. Writers need to remember. So, yep.
Excellent. We have a comment here from Nisha. She says, I haven't read your book, but I'm really looking forward to reading it soon. All the best for your second book.
Hey, so I'm happy to support you guys. If you guys do have a book club, I'm happy to support you with a book. To send you books, or you guys could do the audio book, which is available and you should be able to access in your country.
Great. So no, I think it's been very nice meeting you. If you're ever in India promoting your book or otherwise, we'll be very, very happy to host you. Our book club is based in Bangalore, but we have friends all over the country. So you let us know, and we'll be happy to help you with anything that you need. All the best to the AlzAuthors group and the community, and please convey our best wishes to everyone in the group. Thank you for joining in today, and it's been a real honor and pleasure to have you amongst us.
Thank you, Puneet. It was nice meeting you. Thank you.
And thank you. Bye-bye. Thanks. Bye-bye.